2020. Roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland.
Here.
Tom Baylor.
Here.
Kathy Sherman.
Here.
Jeff Guard.
Here.
Melina Meyer.
Here.
Ann Schaefer.
Here.
David Allison.
Here.
David Gleason.
Here.
That's everyone.
Okay, tonight's work session is the 2021 budget discussion, and I'll turn it over to Manager Howard.
Thank you, everyone. So tonight is the final work session for the 2021 budget. We will present it to council at the regularly scheduled meeting next Wednesday, the 16th, for a final approval. So our hope, of course, is that the document and the work we do tonight will be final and ready for your review and final approval on the next Wednesday. So the document in front of you now reflects the conversations that we've had the last couple of work sessions, updated, of course, with the most recent work session recommendations coming from council from last week. We added also kind of the unknown numbers, the numbers that we were still working on, the PERS relief, some grant pass-through things. We had some updates on our healthcare expenses. We did some movement of some things from information services into its own department to give you all a better sense of how we do our shared service of computer peripherals, IT, licensing software, that sort of thing. And again, we really worked hard to refine these numbers so that they're as accurately displayed what we believe to be an actual scenario for next year. So with that, I think what I'd like to do is open this up for any questions you might have, suggestions or whatever. We do have members of the various departments here. But the document in front of you reflects work that's been done back and forth between department heads and our finance team, and hopefully reflects as best as possible what we're looking forward to for department budgets for next year. I will say that key piece of this is the permanent fund draw that is needed to balance the budget. We were really mindful of council concerns that, we'd rather not take a draw. In an ideal world, we wouldn't. We'd rather minimize that. So again, with the refinements that we made, we have the draw down to $755,000 to balance the budget. And again, that's only if we don't get additional resources from the federal government for additional CARES relief, which we again won't know until the first quarter of 2021. So with that, staff, in an effort to take those big numbers, big chunks of numbers that we can influence the budget and make reductions, we are recommending not that we cut or eliminate positions, but then postpone hiring of 3 positions: human resource director, 1 law enforcement officer, and a vacant position in Parks and Rec. We also not funded any capital requests coming from departments unless they were absolutely essential for life safety. And with that, I guess I will turn it over to Mayor Copeland and let him direct whatever conversation might be needed tonight.
Hey, Councilman Allison.
Yeah, I don't know how you want to go about this, Mr. Mayor, if you want to go through page by page, but I've got a couple pages of questions. Just by page number, if you want.
Yeah. Why don't we go ahead and just dig in, and then that might cover some other questions, and we can just, I'll just go through my council list in order first, and then which one goes, and probably answering some of each other's questions along the way. So. I mean, got just page by page on the fine.
Okay, so starting with page 2, I just want to point out some things there, I guess. The alcohol, tobacco, marijuana tax, surcharge, we're budgeting for $125,000. We've already made $125,000 this year as of 11/30, I guess it is on this. I'm not sure if when that tax started, if it started January 1st, or if there was a delay on starting it, but in any case, I don't see anywhere in the budget where that was used for additional, or for police, CCMCs, CFRC, anything related to helping with the issues that the use of those substances creates for us. So just point that out. Just for the record, so what I've said it, the raw fish tax, I think will be more than that, but see where that ends up. And then if we only go to 3 officers, I would question whether or not the Whittier revenue would remain if we're asking our chief to be an officer and not do administrative work. The other people are going to have to do some of that, and we may end up losing that contract.
Would you like me to address those questions?
Sure.
Okay.
If you'd like to.
First and foremost, up under the alcohol, tobacco tax, you're absolutely right. We have not dedicated any revenue to any specific function. It has become part of our operating budget, which does support CCMC, the police department, and other things. If council wants to make that a dedicated tax, I don't know the exact process by which we can do that, but we can investigate that. And then in terms of the law enforcement, I just want to be clear that we have 3 officers and a chief, so there are 4 bodies. We have not cut any positions. We actually have added 1 from prior years, not in terms of the budget, but in terms of actual personnel. So we've been short-staffed for well over a year, and have been operating with 3 people for way too long, which was 2 officers and a chief. And now we've upped that to 3 officers and a chief. So we actually are in a position where we have more bodies on the ground and are able to function. I know not ideally, but there's a lot of opportunity for us to kind of review how we want to approach that. But I just wanted to clarify that we do have 1 more filled position than we have had for the last year and a half.
And that just reply to that you had a chief that was put in double time, not get paid for it, we weren't paid for it, which brings me to page 3, the $75,000 airport, which you have in revenue there. We are not anywhere near that this year. We are at 28,000 because we don't have the staff.
We haven't billed that completely yet. I think, can you give a more accurate number where that's going to come in?
Not off the top of my head, but that's just cash received. There are still some bills outstanding for that.
I recall it was somewhere closer to 55. Just for reference.
Yeah, I'm just pointing out that I don't think our revenue will be the same if we don't have enough staff to cover. I guess I'm advocating for another officer now, and if we get CARES funding, potentially another one, so we can do our community outreach and our programs in the schools, et cetera. So I think just those revenue figures, we're not going to hire 1, or we leave those revenue figures in and add 1 back in and go from there. So the investment earnings on page 4. Under other revenue, investment earnings. Why is that so low currently? And where does that investment earnings come from? Is that just from the checking account, or?
Yes, it's the checking account, the overnight repurchase agreements. The rates cratered in March. They haven't gone back up. But anticipation is next year it'll be more normal, yeah. And it won't get out of the crater, so to speak.
So the other piece of that, again, we're going to have a group of professionals who've agreed to assist us with an investment policy. We put a lot of money in cash, and there's an opportunity to move a portion of that into an investment account of some kind. It still has flexibility to allow us to access that for our immediate build needs. But we'll be looking very closely at our investment policies around the cash piece, and that we plan will change that those earnings.
Okay, I appreciate the fact that the budget is generally conservative, but we've only gotten $8,000 this year in earnings from that account. I don't imagine that account's gonna have any more money in the next year than it is this year. Probably quite a bit less, but we're still budgeting $50,000 investment earnings from that, so that's probably.
And again, a lot of it is just not invested, it's in cash accounts, which right now are about as close to zero returns as you can possibly get. So we'll be looking at a more comprehensive plan for how to make that cash work for a city.
Over on page 7, in the law enforcement budget, you've got planning on 3 officers, which is what we had this year, right?
3 officers and a chief. Mm-hmm.
So why are you projecting your on-call time to be a third of what it is this year?
Again, this budget came from the police department. Nate, do you want to address your numbers here?
Well, when that number was initially set was the original budget that I proposed, which included 6 officers total for the department. So I did not raise it over last year's budget because I assumed with everyone. Since that has been cut, that number hasn't been readdressed. So that's why it's where it is.
Okay, so I think if we decide as a council to stick with the 3 officers and a chief, I think that's one of the numbers we need to readdress before we finalize this budget. And again, I would advocate to add the 4th officer and leave that alone, but that's my thing there. Same budget, the travel for car rental has $6,000 in there, but there isn't any travel.
And that's probably should be moved. We mean that to be in the travel section. It can be used in any of those 4 categories: per diem, lodging, airfare, whatever. Police is the only department that has a travel budget. It's less than what they requested, but again, it's designed to be used across and satisfy any of those needs in those areas.
So that should be allocated out amongst those 4 categories then?
Or just travel and not have those variations.
But you do have the variations, so it should be allocated. Fix it for next time.
We want them, give them the flexibility to use it however they might, so we'll fix it so it's clearer.
Yeah, I recognize that. I just, looking at it right now, 6,000 in the rental car and nothing in the others, it doesn't make sense.
It should just say travel.
So then I didn't have any other questions until page 12. We had talked about the chains being 27,000, and I thought we had said, and maybe I got confused at the last meeting, but that was under operating supplies for snow removal, that those chains were there. But at any rate, between the operating supplies in the snow removal and the vehicle parts and repairs under equipment maintenance for 80,000, what did those entail? The only big thing I can remember was the 27,000 for chains, but
I will have Sam address those questions.
Did you almost wipe out?
No, but the chair was stuck under the table. Okay. Are we on?
Push and hold the red on the bottom.
It's good? Okay, so let's talk about snow removal first. So all of the operating supplies were moved into, or, excuse me, the road sand and the road maintenance. Previous years, we had budgeted like 14 and 7, and they were all moved into operating supplies. So that's why that's up to 36. So in 2020, we had both of those funded, chains and sand, and that money was used to purchase the sweeper, and it shows as a 0 here. In 2019, it was cut by the city manager to save costs. In previous years, it has been more like this total. So the 74,570 is a little bit deceiving because of previous cuts and then using the sand and chains to help purchase the sweeper. So we need to buy some chains, we need to fill the sand shed. That's why those are there. So the equipment maintenance, so that's where we moved money, 40 grand from street maintenance to equipment maintenance to just put it all in one place. It's the mechanics doing the maintenance, 40 or 30, I think it's 40. Instead of having 40 in equipment maintenance and 40 in street maintenance, we just combined it. With Mark being a new guy, me doing the new person, it just seemed more logical to us. Does that answer your question, Dave? Sort of.
Yeah, I just don't know where they're spending $80,000. What are they buying for $80,000?
Well, part of it is they do want to get an oil system where you can pull down from the roof, but part of it is if the grader blows out, we got to have money in the budget. Some of it's speculative, some of it's required maintenance. We got equipment, street equipment, chip seal equipment, all the equipment. It costs a lot to maintain it.
So most of this is speculative. It's in case something happens, the money's there to fix it.
I don't
You
want
don't
to
have
say
anything that's broke now that needs a $50,000 overhaul.
not yet.
Just
I think, though,
point it out.
that most of it is not speculative. There is a portion of it that is. That
Right.
is
Yes. There is.
anticipatory. Maybe that's a better word. It anticipates that
Yeah.
things happen.
Okay, then on page 14, the ski hill, what is they didn't have anything spent this year for repairs and maintenance yet. Of course, the ski season's just getting started, but last week's budget had $5,000 in that line, and we've got 10,000 today. Did we miss a number last time, or did we?
I don't recall that we made any changes, so I know I don't have last year's, so let me run and get clarification on that. Do you have that?
I think it was because we looked at the lease. We tried to cut it, and then we realized that it's actuals. So because of the lease, we had to put it back in. We tried to do a 10% cut to that, but last week. But since it was
We have a
lease,
15-year lease with them that states exactly what we're responsible for.
Can you send the council a copy of that lease at some point in time to
Sure.
review?
It expires in 2027, I believe, so we still have, 6, 7 years on that lease.
Just like to take a look at it.
Yep. Okay.
Then on the non-departmental, we don't have the health insurance accrual this time. Can you explain that?
But I went to the departments and tried to get a better understanding of what it would be, and so they were adjusted. Each individual department was adjusted, and so the lack of an accrual, I mean, we don't need the accrual with the adjustments at the department level.
Okay, and then can you explain what the in-kind services allocation is on the non-departmental?
It is the in-kind for the transfers to other entities, I think.
Yeah. So when we, for instance, provide in-kind to the Chamber of Commerce with their building and other things, when we provide in-kind to CCMC or the school district, all of those total.
Yeah, on page 15, the transfer to other entities, 902. I think that's the offset. All those in-kinds.
Okay, I'll look at that a little more.
Except I do want to point out the Chamber of Commerce in-kind lease is not in that number, in the 254 number. It was put into a different number. It has to be relabeled. It was insurance reimbursement. I can tell you what line if I can get it. Oh, on the revenue side, sorry.
There's a few things that would still need to be corrected, and that's one of them that was put in the wrong place. But the intent of that in-kind services allocation is to reflect the actual in-kind work that we are doing.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with
Yeah.
the number being there, but I was questioning where the revenue side of that is, because it's not in the chamber's budget. They don't have an expense they don't have an expense on their side for paying that in kind, and we don't have it. So where is it recorded on ours as the revenue side of that?
For the lease is in other revenue, line 101,397.
Page
4. Third of the way down, maybe. 397,49745. Misnamed insurance reimbursements.
Okay, and you're going to fix the heading on that?
Correct.
Okay, then on page 23, which was the harbor budget, I believe. We had talked about it last time, but I see it's still in the harbor for that wharfage, the additional fuel wharfage, which this is combined with the original wharfage and the we increased it when we passed that thing with the public there that they voted on. And I just want to be sure that does the half a cent a pound fish tax cover the bond payments, what they're going to be, or, because this and the fish tax were supposed to pay for the bond payment when and if we ever get a bond. If we don't, then this was going to be used for, maintenance things. But I see that it's being utilized as part of the regular budget for the
harbor and not put aside for bond payments, so.
Tony, can you speak to that on the revenue side? Harbor, I guess it's the wharfage?
Not the wharf, the fuel.
Fuel oil wharfage, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what it was. The plan is to put it towards that. I wanted it kind of just spelled out and separated just so we could track it. I know the plan is, well, we talked about at least whether the plan is that way or not, is putting it into a separating it with the 0.5% and with that fuel wharfage into a separate account for that. So I did ask Ken to separate it out so we could at least look at it and see where we're at, especially for the first couple of years since we're not spending it on anything for a bond right now.
Okay, that makes sense. And there's a spot here where the 0.5 cent a pound is, and I think it probably belongs with that so that it's not in their general, the harbor's general operating.
Yeah, I mean, I just would like to see it. So wherever we put it, as long as we can track that,
Yeah,
kind of get an idea.
There's a spot here.
Yeah.
Can't tell you.
And I believe that the auditors do make those adjustments and put them into reserve funds when the season is over and all the revenue's been collected, then it gets transferred out into restricted.
Yeah, save the auditors some work and put it there to begin with.
Okay.
Where's the 0.5% fish tax as a revenue?
It's not in there yet. It ended up in the audit.
On page 36, there's under the water fund depreciation reserves, there's $100,000 there in the reserve fund budgeted under other revenues that wasn't in last week's. Where is that coming from?
It's my attempt to balance the enterprise. I'm still working the kinks out in terms of how to make the bottom line zero. It's a quirk I'm working with actually the old finance manager, Dean, to help direct that, along with the auditors.
Okay, well, I'm not sure that enterprise funds need to be zero at the end, but anyway, before we finalize this budget, I'd like the numbers to be accurate at least, and us to understand what they are, because right now I have no idea where that $100,000 came from.
I think actually from the fund balance.
The discussion we're having tonight will be incorporated with the assistance of our auditor into tomorrow, a document that will be released to all of you by Friday, and it will be correct.
Okay, and then on page 39, the health insurance, other revenues. How come this year's was minus 306,000?
The health insurance fund definitely needs to be reconciled, and I'm doing that with our auditors.
Okay, so that's not accurate yet either then?
Correct.
Okay. Is the $1 million estimate on the health insurance claims for next year, is that an accurate number, or?
It's
is that a speculative number?
Too? I wouldn't call it speculative. It's a number that I'm working through. It is high, but we've had high claims in the past couple of years.
Well, I see. 100,000 was the actual for 2 years ago, and last year was 425 through 1130. Of course, that's going to be, you got 2 months worth of claims at least there, but the budget was only 600,000, and
yeah, there are
$1 million this year.
There are some corrections that need to be made on the 19 items in the health service fund, which started last year, needs to be, like I said, reconciled.
Okay, well, that's all the questions I had at this point in time. I've got other comments, but I'll save those. Anybody else has any questions?
Okay,
Can I just make a brief comment? That are regarding the health insurance, I just wanted to make a brief comment if I could.
Can't hear anything.
Okay, sorry. Just kind of in response to yours, at the renewal.
Come to the mic.
It's not on.
Not on.
Push the red button on the bottom. Push and hold it.
Sorry. That tiny little red button.
Helen, do you have any objections or kind of like staff comments to go through you or from council?
I'm sorry, I thought that's why we were all here to speak up. I was just gonna say, Clay, that when at the renewal.
Well, wait, Lane, I like things to go, come from council through Helen to staff.
Also, we can't hear on the
I
phone.
was gonna make a clarification.
Thank you for that, Mayor.
Okay, I was a problem with the mic, so can you check that in, Andrew? Thank you. So I'm just going to go through council list here for questions and whatnot. Schaefer, Councilman Schaefer?
I had a bunch of bullet points that Councilman Allison did them all, so I don't currently have any questions except, Helen, you did send an email requesting more data from the police department, and I was wondering if you had gotten that back.
No, and it's not any negligence on the part of Nate or the department. I feel like there's an opportunity for us to get more information. There's other committees that are working, and I believe that this information could be forthcoming in early January so that council could have a really robust conversation around the kinds of policing it wants and how to fund it. But it is going to require more time, and I wasn't able to pull that all together. That said, Nate did provide you with some basic statistics around calls and responses, and has provided a bit of historical data to you. But I believe that those numbers, while relevant and certainly important, need to be viewed in a more analytical way and within the context of how we can provide the service the community expects and make sure that our officers are not being overworked. And my understanding in the research I've been doing that there's some opportunities there, and I'd like some time to be able to get that information to you and work with the department on finding some solutions.
Yeah, okay, great. I just wanted to make sure I hadn't missed it, and I did appreciate the report that Nate sent, so thank you to him for working on that. But beyond that, I think Councilman Allison hit all the points that I was going to ask about, so I will defer for now. Thank you.
Okay, good. That process worked. Councilman Gleason.
Yeah, I don't know. I felt like I was cool listening to Dave Allison. He nailed it. Very thorough. So I guess the only thing I would say is I think on that bond that we're going to have to pay back with the debt we're going to have to pay back on the harbor, the slip fees were the increase in slip fees was the third part of that. And Tony had a one-page document that had that stuff all tallied from last year. I don't know if Tony probably doesn't have that with him, but that was pretty informative when he came out with that, and that's a way for us to track that exact amount of money per year. So that's the only thing that I was going to say after Dave was done. He was super thorough. Nice work, Dave.
Okay, Councilman Sherman.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Dave, you are excellent at that, and and thank you. I was also going to comment on a couple of things with the police. I was going to ask about that 125,000. So you said that that money that has come in from the tax for alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana is part of the general operating fund, and so I do not remember what was the process, but could you find that out for us, how we could dedicate that, if we are allowed to dedicate that, to aspects of the police department, maybe family resource center or mental health in the community? So that would be one thing I'd ask for. And then also the Whittier contract and the airport contract both concerned me if we don't get back up to 4 officers. That said, I am okay if I understand what you just said. There is a committee that's taking that results of our survey, our policing survey, and kind of reviewing that data and maybe rethinking how we go forward with our community policing. Did I understand that correctly, Helen?
So right now, there's a committee made up of Kay Adams, a mental health provider, CCMC, Dr. Sanders, Nate, myself, and Sarah from NVE. And we're all looking at kind of a systemic approach to how do we deal with chronic offenders who are part of our community, and are there resources that we can bring to bear to do that? And we've had some really great discussions. We're meeting again tomorrow. There's certainly a lot of interesting perspectives being brought to the table by the various parties. And I think there's a real eagerness to look at other solutions that might help us with some of the kind of chronic issues that we have in town. So we're in the middle stages of it, I would say. We've had a number of meetings, but just now we're starting to really look at solutions. And I expect that will be forthcoming into January. And I think there's some opportunities for some really great partnerships too. So to answer your question, we're ongoing. We're definitely looking. All of them have reviewed the survey, and all of them work with folks who have been in the police system and the law enforcement system, and we're trying to figure out if there's any way to break those cycles.
Okay, great. That really helps me a lot, because a lot of the questions constituents have come to me with have been what happened to the survey, what about our comments on the survey, and I'm happy to hear that all those entities are talking together. And so just to summarize my feelings right now, I would be willing to wait until the first quarter to have that review continue, because there might be some new and the outside of the box ideas that pop out of that. And so that makes me really happy to hear that. I would like to see more funding for police, but I'm willing to wait till the first quarter. The only other specific questions I had, I was carefully checking the information services and how things got moved over. And I just wanted to make sure that software licensing, because we had always broken that out, and there was software licensing for Cassell, which I see is still in there, and that's what I wanted to make sure, and also the other entities in the city who have licensing. So all of those carried through, which I was watching. And then I was just going to question, what was your guesstimate with the $15,000 for Cordova Center revenue? Are we we're just hopeful that we'll be able to start doing bookings again in maybe 6 months or so?
Yes. I mean, who could possibly guess? I guess at this point in time, I just wish I had a crystal ball that was a little bit more accurate than the one that I seem to be looking into. But with the vaccine coming online, there's strong anticipation and strong indication that things are going to start to normalize mid-year. Whether that happens or not, it's anybody's guess, but there's certainly hope. And I think we could plan to start seeing things reopening a bit, certainly by summer. So it's a conservative number on, if we were normal, it might be ambitious if things just continue as they are, but we're hopeful there.
Yeah, I would be hopeful too, but hopefully we'll get back to those bigger numbers as soon as we can safely. And that's all I had at this point. Thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor Meyer.
Yeah, thanks. Again, a lot of my questions and concerns got brought up, but I did have a question on the dispatching services that we do for Whittier and Girdwood in the budget. I guess I don't know a lot about that contract, and I see that in 2019 it says 35,000, and then it went down to 25. I was just kind of curious about that because I think that number is a little bit low, and I'm sure we have a contract with them, so I'm not sure how long that contract is. And then my other point that I was going to bring up was the enterprise fund rate increase of 5%. And I would like to not do that for 2021 with everything happening. I know that was part of our plan, is raising it by 5% every year, but I think that we should not do that for 2021, or at least wait 6 months or something. I think we need to not do a rate increase at the time.
I can have Nate address the contract with Whittier, if you have that information.
I believe so. Check. See, I was just looking historically back at our 2019 budget, and I'm not sure. I believe it was my belief that that contract had been $25,000 all along. I see that it was listed at $35,000, but I also believe that's an annual contract with them. So I'm pretty sure we can revisit that in discussion with Whittier. We do quite a bit of service for them. I don't think it would be wrong of us to consider negotiating with them for a bit more money than we're currently being paid.
And our dispatch staff, of course, is at the levels it is because we do provide additional services, not just to Cordova, but to Whittier and Girdwood.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was just kind of thinking when I was looking at it, is we probably have to increase staff, or I don't know, it just seemed a little bit low for providing that service. Girdwood is a community larger than us, so for about the same. So anyways, just that one, and then also the rate increase. That is a concern of mine, just with everything happening.
Okay. I'll just take that as a general comment to council for consideration for the overall budget. Councilman Baylor.
I don't have any questions. I got more comments, so when we get to the end of this, I'll comment on a few things moving forward.
Okay. Councilman Gard.
Thank you. Do have one point that you could use a little clarification on. Our contract for dispatch services to Whittier and Girdwood, we just use the dispatchers for that, right?
Correct.
Number of officers we have doesn't impact that service itself specifically, unless I'm looking at it wrong.
That's correct.
Please. Okay. Okay. I think that's all I got right now. I've got comments, no more questions.
Okay. We've been through one round of questions. Any others that have risen, council? Just open it up. Councilman Allison.
Yeah, I guess just regarding Vice Mayor Meyer's comment about the in-kind I mean, not the in-kind, but the 5% increase on the utilities. I could go for not doing that this year, but it just, I guess, point of clarification, if we do that, which we did in this budget here, I don't believe the in-kinds were increased that 5% on there because they're the same as they were last week. So something needs to be either we go back to the other way or we need to add 5% to our in-kind utilities as well.
Any other comment or any other questions, council?
Comment.
Councilman, I guess we can go to comments then. Helen, I just ask, do you have any general comments or feedback you want to provide for council? Go to comments.
I think the big issue for all of you is how much of a draw from the permanent fund you want to take to balance the budget. And that might be a good focal point on the conversation too. What we present to you here reflects a $755,000 draw from the permanent fund. Any reductions in revenue or increases in expenses, of course, will increase that number. So I just put that out there as a reminder as you proceed with this conversation.
Okay, comments, Councilman Baylor.
Yeah, well, I'll start with the permanent fund, and I don't see any choice but to support that. Unfortunately, I don't see where else we can cut our way out of this. I do believe or do feel, and I'd like to hear from, maybe it's the plan here, I don't know. I see repayment of permanent fund distribution on your list here, and I hope the other council will weigh in on this. If we get more CARES money, I think that money doesn't go back into our budget, doesn't increase things. It goes back to pay the money off that we pulled out of the permanent fund. So we end up with a $500,000 windfall. It doesn't mean, all right, we're going to start hiring more people. We're going to, we need to stay with our budget that we're going to approve here and pay some of that money back into the permanent fund. Because I think next year is going to be also challenging. I don't see the state ponying up on the school bond reimbursement, so that's a big hole. I'm also concerned about the hospital coming back to us this fall with that $300,000 ask, and if they do, then that's going to come out of the permanent fund. I think the tax for as was mentioned by Councilman Allison, the tax that we put in for the alcohol, tobacco, and cigarettes, marijuana, we sat at this table and we told the public that, the reason for that was, the justification for that was because most of our troubles with our emergency room and our police force a lot of this was caused by that. And I had a comment from a gentleman after the meeting. He said, you guys are just going to spend it anyway. I said, no. So this goes to our, the word escapes me though, but our credibility, and now we're going to be asking for money to get equipment for that landfill, Oh, sure, you want money for equipment, and what are you going to spend that on? We're going to spend it on the landfill. We're going to spend this money that we raise from tobacco and alcohol. We're going to spend that on our police and hospitals. So I think we need to be careful about these things, just throw them in the general fund. I was unaware, I think it was from Chief Hicks, retired Chief Hicks, letter that in 2012, council gave direction to the police force to operate more hours. Did anybody else read that? I think that's what his statement was, and I was unaware of that. And that was one of the things that I've been throwing out for way before this survey is what is it? What is level of policing do we require? And so obviously, if we have less hours, you can do that with 3 officers. So I was unaware that they were given a directive for, I believe it was 20 hours a day, which is quite a bit of coverage. The permanent fund, fortunately, we are getting some money on the interest, but I would expect that. Hopefully we get going on this folks looking into the investment committee. You know, the NASDAQ is up 40% for the year. The S&P 500 is up 15% for the year. You should be making money. This is an amazing year in the stock market. If you're not rolling things over at 8, 12, 15, 20%, then you're in the wrong business. So we should be rolling some money over, and I look forward to seeing the end results of this year with UBS. I also think we're not doing our duty and role by not staying on RFP, not getting some other input, not looking deeper in this. The last update we got was in consent calendar, for God's sakes. It was a 2% return on a year that is just, like I said, the returns are crazy. It was in the consent calendar. We didn't even talk about it. And now we're relying on that money to bail us out. So it is an important aspect for what we have. So we need to get back onto that. So I guess I'm going to support this budget when I see the numbers as cleaned up. You know, I look forward to that. There's still some things, as Councilman Allison pointed out. But as far as the permanent fund, I don't see any choice but to pull the money out and keep us going. That's all for now.
Okay. Other comments, Council?
I've got a couple.
Councilman Guard.
For about 99% of it, I agree strongly with what Councilman Baylor said. There are a couple small exceptions to that. One is, I understand the thought and idea behind putting everything back into the permanent fund, and I'm in favor of getting everything back in there we can, because I think that's going to be our lifeline here in the near future. Hopefully not too long in the future, but it will be our lifeline for a while. But we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard spot on this police deal. We all want good public safety for Cordova. What that is, nobody knows. We've talked about it a couple times. We've been waiting for data. We've been waiting for information. It's no diss on anybody that we haven't got it. I know we've all been busy, and it's been a weird year to try to see our way through. But I think we need into the early part of next year to figure out exactly what we're doing with public safety here in Cordova, what we all feel we need as a community so we can feel safe and know that we're doing good, and we can have public safety officers feel like the community supports them, or they're not working them like dirty dogs just to use them up. We're not going to be able to come up with those kind of decisions here in a short-term time between now and a week from now when we approve a budget. We can get it done by then. So I'm in favor of moving that decision off until early next year in January, February, or however long it takes to get this whole thing cogitated and figured out and move on with. But we do have to leave the possibility open. You know, Tom talked about not doing any new hires, but if we decide as a community that yes, we need another fourth officer to go with the chief, so we're 4 officers and a chief, then we need to have that ability to do that. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. Anyway, thank you very much.
Councilman Allison.
Yeah, if we're not going to go with the 4th officer now, then I believe that we need to cut at least the airport contract in half. And I don't know what that risk is for keeping the contract, if there's a minimum or not, but we're not going to have the staff to do it all. So if we're going to put that off, then we need to adjust that revenue, and then that does other things to everything else too. I don't was gonna say I don't have a problem with the permanent fund, but I do. I dislike taking that much out, but as Councilmember Baylor said, I don't think we have a whole lot of choice. If we had not had the CARES fund this year and our revenues ended up the way they were, we would have pulled $1 million out of the permanent fund already this year just to make it to today. Fortunately, we had that money and we could fill in the gaps where we were short and fill that in with the emergency services money that got filled in with CARES fund. So we're probably going to have to take some out. How much we're going to have to take out, I really couldn't tell you right now, because I think there's too many errors still in the budget that need to be fixed. And I'm not blaming Ken or anybody else. I know that Ken was putting a spot in the middle of everything, and he's getting things taken care of. But we're going to have pass a budget, and I hope the auditors and them can work it out so that our next iteration is accurate and can provide us some confidence. The alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana tax needs to be spent on additional resources, whatever you want to say, for the city in that area, in police, family resources, mental health, somewhere in there. If it's not, and if we can't point to it, I know we can't dedicate taxes. We can't say that this is dedicated to the hospital or this is dedicated to the police, but we can certainly set policy to where that money or the equivalent of that money goes to that area. And if we're not going to do that, then I'm going to suggest we have an ordinance that withdraws that tax. As Councilmember Baylor said, we told the public when we were pushing that forward that would help us. I know that some of that was the hospital. At the time we passed that, the hospital was sucking up $500,000 to $1 million a year, and we needed a way to help the general fund with that. But we've cut that down to $300,000 this year, and yeah, I agree with what's been said before, that if the hospital comes back asking for money to pay their PERS payment in June, we know where that's coming from. I would agree with Councilmember Baylor that if we do get CARES funding and we can pay for our emergency services with that and our first responders with that we take that money that we were spending on the first responders and we put that back into the permanent fund after we get our department up to what it needs to be. And I'm not kicking that can down the road and keeping on kicking her until we get to wherever we're getting to. We need to get it done, have whatever committee meetings you're going to have or we're going to have, get the solution early in 2000 in January if we're not going to go. And again, I still support budgeting now. So anyway, at the final budget, I will make some amendment suggestions. If we're leaving it with 3 officers and the chief, to reduce some of the revenues, which is going to increase the permanent fund, take some, because we won't have as many revenues, maybe, depending on how these other numbers that weren't correct work out. So anyway, I guess that's my comments. We need to use the ATM tax for what it was proposed for. We need to fully fund our police department. We can't be saving dimes to spend quarters in 3 months, which is what's going to end up happening. We're going to end up having to pay for training everything else. And anyway, I can support the budget in general, but I will have some amendments on those revenues if staff doesn't take a closer look at the revenues and see what, with that staffing level, we're going to have to change some things. We're going to have to increase the on-call time, probably have to increase the overtime, and decrease the revenues a little bit, and then adjust the permanent fund to balance it all out. So those are my comments.
Okay, I think Helen has responses to it, and Helen, her three councilmen have mentioned whether or not those ATM taxes can be dedicated, and so that might be something to follow through with if you want to touch on that as well.
I don't believe we can dedicate, but you can certainly
account for them.
Strongly recommend. Let's just put it that way. I just want to also say that Nate and I can sit down tomorrow, I would say, and really look at the airline security service. Again, we have one additional officer, so the 2020 numbers reflect a really limited staffing, and hopefully now we're in a place where that is more doable. But I'll get with Nate and get an accurate number of what he thinks can and can't be done with the airline security, and we'll update that information for the final budget. The other possibility, which is also something we can consider if we are indeed looking at the budget in first quarter, there are some revenue adjustments that we could potentially make as we get more information about how current staffing might impact our ability to perform some of those services. I don't know the repercussions of not being available to provide security at the airport, if we would lose the contract to someone else, or if there's other alternatives of how we might fulfill that. So we'll get information on that and make sure that the number is reflective of what Nate and his department thinks is possible. Okay. And that will include overtime, and that'll include on-call. And again, I think there's opportunity to really look at and make sure that the department has the resources they need, but that also, if there's an opportunity, for instance, as Councilman Baylor said, that he just heard that in 2012, we said we need 20-hour day coverage. Maybe the community thinks that is not needed right now. I don't know. I think there's an opportunity for us to look at every single aspect of the department, what they've been asked to do, and figure out what's relevant today.
Hey, Councilman Ellison, briefly, and then I'd like to give...
Yeah, I just had a follow-up to that, and just a comment for whoever the chief is. I don't expect our chief to spend the hours that our previous chief spent doing everything themselves, going to the airport and doing all of the overtime and working 12 on, 12 off with another officer. The chief doesn't get paid for that when they are officially the chief, I don't believe. So anyway, I don't, we can't expect to have our salaried people do the work that our hourly people could do, so.
Okay. So we've had comments from Councilman Baylor, Guard, and Allison. Any other council comments?
Councilman Sherman.
Councilman Sherman.
I am, in the big picture, I'm okay with taking the money from the permanent fund, the fund that was set aside for these times, as Neil Schultz reminds me. But I'm also in favor of building it up and repaying it and making it stronger as we go forward. So with that said, I agree with Mr. Baylor that if we are lucky enough to receive more CARES funds, I would like to see some repayment go back to the permanent fund as much as possible. And also on that line, I'd really like to see, maybe in the first quarter, a report from this investment committee, so that we can start the year out thinking about maybe making a change from UBS and seeing if we can use our money in maybe a more profitable fashion, because we are going to continue to have lean times and difficulties, especially with the state at this point in time. So those are two things that I would also agree with, that we need to set policy to dedicate that tax, the alcohol, tobacco, marijuana tax, to the things that we've all talked about: police department, family resource center, sound alternatives, Blanca Health, mental services. I think that's really critical that we follow through with what we committed to the community. And other than some of the corrections that we've talked about, and I will continue to go through the budget and compare it, but I think I would be okay with drawing the money from the permanent fund and approving the budget at this point in time, and then revisiting it. That's a must-do for me in the first quarter of 21.
Okay. Other council comments?
This is Councilman Schaefer.
Councilman Schaefer.
Yeah, I also support the PFD draw. The gain in our investments for this year does help assuage that hurt a little bit. And as has been stated by others before me, I guess I don't really see any way around it. And again, I agree with what others have said before me, that if we do get some sort of COVID relief funding, that I would like to build that fund back up again as much as we can. I think Vice Mayor Meyer's point about the rate increase for the enterprise funds was interesting. So I could also support a pause in the rate increase for next year, or maybe even just a 6-month pause. I know it's been a hard year for some individuals and businesses. We're spread pretty thin. And I'd be willing to wait until the very beginning of the next year to continue our public safety decisions, both to wait for those community discussions to progress, and also so that we can get more fine-scale data from our police department that we can use to make more informed decisions for the community, just so we have a better idea of seasonally what we need for the community, et cetera, just more so than just on a day-to-day basis. And also when we'll hopefully have a better idea of what our financial outlook for 2021 is. So I'd be willing to wait to have those discussions as long as they happen really early on after the new year. So yeah, once all the numbers are cleaned up and we have a better idea of what the draw from the PFD is, I for the most part can see myself supporting the budget that's coming out.
Okay, Helen.
What would be helpful if during this work session or at the end of this work session, if the body could vote or somehow give strong indication of whether that 5% rate increase is to remain in the budget or we should withdraw it from the budget. So if I could get a sense from council, that would be really helpful as we put together this final document.
Do we have a rough idea what the fiscal note is, what the difference is?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
Sorry.
I kind of wanted to give the other two councilmen a chance. Could you hold for just a sec, Councilman Ellison?
Yeah, I was just, yeah.
Councilman Meyer or Gleason, do you have any comments?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Gleason.
Yeah.
I think that this is where we're at. We're going to have to approve this. I did have a question for Nate through Helen. I just was curious, and this may have already been answered, but I don't remember it. If he already has an officer that he wants to hire,
Nate, yes, he does, and he can maybe speak to that.
Yes, thank you for the question. I do have an officer who has been given a conditional job offer, an offer of hire, which allows us to do a psychological examination on him and conduct a background investigation. So that was given to him many months ago. The delay is just in the background investigator getting back to us with that investigation to inform me if, he passes all the checks and balances there, so that we're assured that we're going to get somebody who meets the standards required by the APSC to be an officer in this state. And due to the budget discussion that has come up of late, I haven't actually hounded that investigator too much about completing that because I was unsure as to where this was going to end up.
Okay, thanks, Nate. Yeah, I just wanted to know if we did decide to go forward with the fourth officer, if there was going to be one available immediately, and it sounds like there is. So I just say well put by Councilman Baylor and Allison. I agree with everything that was said there. And I do think that if we could do away with that increase, then that would help. I'm sure that would help. So I'm in favor of that also. Permanent funds. That's it.
Okay. Councilman Meyer? Any comments?
I don't have any additional comments at this time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Allison?
Yeah, I was just going to say that that 5% increase, it balanced, or there was money left over without that 5%. So there's money in the budget to not do the 5% increase. But again, if we do keep the 5% in there, then we need to adjust our in-kinds, the 5% as well.
Councilman Baylor. Councilman Baylor, then Sherman.
I think we used pretty sound reasoning for that 5% increase. I think it was well thought out process, and I would not support taking that away. I think it's there for a reason. If we don't get that money now, we just have to increase it later. So I wouldn't support taking that away. I think 5% was reasonable. I think we went with small steps like that with 5%. So we're not hitting everybody hard at one time, or we're not running into an emergency. All of a sudden, we need this, we need that. I think some of you property owners experience that with your house evaluation, your property evaluations. One minute you're at $250,000, and then you get your next assessment, and then you're at $375,000. And it's because for whatever reasons, we're not able to keep up on that on a yearly basis and make those gradual increments, which is a little easier to stomach. So I think we use sound reasoning in coming up with a 5% tax, and I think we should leave it in there. I do think moving forward, we need to look at some of these other things, and I've brought this up about Bedarkey, and I've gotten some comments from the public, but those fees need to cover that employee's cost, and I think if you spread that out over the range of the membership, I think not this year, but next year, I think we need to start looking at that sort of thing. I said we can't compare that with Anchorage and Juneau and Sitka, the big population centers. We have $1 million hole in our budget, so moving forward to next year, I think the city manager should be looking at that and working with the Parks and Rec and see what we can do about that. So, yeah, that's all I got.
Councilman Sherman.
Sure, thanks. And now I'm going to echo my friend. Too was feeling that the 5% annual increase, I'd like to see that stay in place because of the same reasons Councilman Baylor just mentioned. We are going to require business license next year. We're going to not do the sales tax compensation. So I think we need to kind of try and, as painful as it might be, get back to our norm. And those things are small increments. Yes, they're increments, and yeah, they're going to hurt some more than others. But I think we need to get back on that track because they are important revenue to us. And so the sooner we can do that without going, 6 months or whatever, and then hitting people up, I think that would be better in the long term. And it's just really hard to say that and when you don't know what's going to happen next year. I've been looking hard at Parks and Rec and some of their programming, and I think if we take time to evaluate what we do with the police department in the future in terms of community policing, we should probably take the same kind of care and, down the road, police department's first, but do the same thing with our Parks and Rec department and see what's important that we offer and are we covering our costs and can we improve our services and yet make some revenue at the same time. So I look at this more as instead of a painful thing as an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to reevaluate how we're spending our money. So, example, the alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana tax. We can correct can set policy for what we want to see there. We get that straight, and then we can move on to other departments. But I think we need to look at this as an opportunity. It's scary, but an opportunity nonetheless. Those are my comments.
Okay, other general comments, Council?
Good.
Councilman Guard.
Yeah, as far as the alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana tax goes, what we did was we said we wanted to do that for costs the city was incurring or city entities were incurring because of things occurring because of the use of those substances. Right now in the proposed budget, we've got about $1.2 million between law enforcement and CCMC that we're looking at. But we can't really say we're not dedicating or using those monies for that. It's to defray costs we're already incurring because of those uses of those substances. As far as the 5%, we're a community of seasonality. Most of our money, whether it's from fishing or construction or whatever, most of it comes in the season. So when we did this 5% incrementally, I believe, if I'm remembering right, we did it for 5 years. So if we took and moved that rate increase back, taking effect at the end of June, 6 months into the year, and then added 6 months, or planned 6 months onto the end of the 5 years, you wouldn't really be shorting ourselves any dollars. The only thing we'd be shorting ourselves is time on dollars. The reason we did this was enterprise funds were not amassing enough capital to replace equipment as it wore out. So I think we could very well afford to move payment of that rate increase off until the end of June, 6 months into the season. So wouldn't be quite as hard a hit on a lot of folks as it would be. We wouldn't be shorting ourselves down the road if we added the 6 months onto the other end of our 5-year plan. All it would be doing is moving it back 6 months. As far as the adjusting numbers on revenues for the law enforcement department, if we've looked at generating someplace in the neighborhood of $55,000 on an $80,000 possible contract for the airport, and we did that on one officer and one chief for a bunch of that this year, I don't know that we're going to be that short with 3 officers and chief. And I don't know that's where we're going to end up at. I mean, we might end up after looking at this that we need to add another officer, or we may decide we need to add 2 more, after we sit down and look at everything. But I don't think that is gonna be a huge revenue we gotta refigure. And as far as the contract with Whittier and, Girdwood, if those services are being supplied by our dispatchers, number of officers we have will not affect that contract, as I understand it. So anyway, those are my thoughts on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Guard, for that reminder on why those increases were put in place. They were for 5 years, and yeah, it wasn't keeping up with things like the broken baler replacement and aging equipment and so forth. So I just had a question, Susan. The setting the rate schedules, doesn't that have to happen at the first of the year by code? Or I'm just trying to think if yeah, I see it's on the agenda. So it seemed like it was in code that we had to set those.
It is not,
so
we have definitely done it in the new year.
Okay, good. That's what I was asking. Good. Other comments, Council? Councilman Allison.
Yeah, I guess just, I know the staff is going to be doing some work before the next iteration of this budget comes out, but I would ask the manager when she works with the acting chief or interim chief of police on their analysis of the number of officers and to consider what expenses and revenues are going to change based upon 3. I think the budget was submitted with 6 total, 5 officers and a chief, and now that that's down, what's going to affect? It's going to affect both the expenses and the revenue side of that potentially. But I'd also like to analyze if we decide to wait until February and we decide we need a 4th officer in February, what the costs of recruiting are. I know that we only had I think $2,000 for recruitment fee or relocation fees and things like that. Anyway, do the complete analysis, and I'd like to see that before we've passed the final budget as well. Regarding the 5%, I could go either way on that. I understand the reasons why we did it. I also understand that although it's not a lot of money, it can be a lot to somebody on a fixed income, and but I would much rather go 5% every year than go 2 years without it and then have a 25% increase. That hurts a lot worse. So.
Mm-hmm. So what might help, Helen, I think I've heard 2 councilmen say defer it for the year, 2 for maybe 6 months, and 2 just implement it. So it might be good to just have the fiscal notes on what those look like, what the difference would be, because 6 month deferral you might still get 2/3 of the revenue because of the seasonality. So any other comments, council? Or questions? Okay, so do we want to have another work session before the regular meeting next week, just with an update? Is that Danny?
If we do that, we will postpone approval of the budget, which was scheduled for next Wednesday. So we have to notice that meeting by Friday, correct, Susan?
By a week prior.
Right.
She noticed the meeting today.
Right.
But the actual information can be put out with the packet on Friday.
If this packet isn't put out on Friday,
okay,
I'd say we'd have to come up with a new date for the public hearing for the budget, which would then be the approval date.
I see. So basically some of those corrections will go out in the packet?
We will have those done tomorrow. it's a commitment.
Okay.
So I would like to keep our schedule on approving the budget, but I would need to understand from all of you what you would need to make that happen, or if you feel like we need to postpone the budget, this is the meeting where we'll have to make a decision on when we would be able to approve the budget.
Councilman Allison?
Yeah, I don't want to see it again until the numbers are right. Till all the numbers are there and you're happy
And I
with
just,
them.
yeah,
And we're happy with them.
and I just want to make sure that we have the numbers that you guys want to see, which includes, whether or not to do these rate increases. I'm hearing that there might be willingness to postpone the police conversation. So I would assume that I wouldn't put the additional police officer in this budget until we had a chance to look at that in January. But I just want to make sure I've got a clear understanding of where everyone stands so that we're not giving you the wrong information.
Mayor Copeland, Councilman Sherman.
Councilman Sherman?
I think what you had just mentioned would be really useful, the dollar amount, that 5% annual increase, if we, postpone that till June. That don't necessarily need to see that in a budget format, it's just the dollar amount or the changes. It could be in the cover letter. I think that's the biggest thing for me, I guess. I'm not sure about everybody else.
So Councilman Sherman, like in a cover letter, you could have the fiscal note if you have no 5% deferral or a 6-month or a year. And then like the police, if the position's filled and the associated
Correct.
revenues, or if it isn't. And then I think the bottom line of that would be what would be the corresponding impact on the permanent fund, because that's where it'd be coming from. Helen?
I just
I
want.
would think those things could go into a cover letter version.
So there's two things I just want to clarify and make sure we're all on the same page on is there's the 5% increase that goes to the enterprise funds, which impacts their, operations, but doesn't impact our general fund. So if we're looking at this as a general fund budget, I'm not sure we have 5% increases, or do we, in the budget for the general fund? Yes. No. Okay. So there's the general fund, which is what requires the draw from the permanent fund. And then there's the increases that are going strictly to enterprise funds, which doesn't impact our permanent fund draw. Those are, those budgets are, income and expenses have to support their operations, and we view them somewhat separately for that reason. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that the 5% impacts the enterprise funds, but it doesn't impact our general fund budget.
The allocated administrative costs?
Right, the allocated administrative cost does, but I don't think that's a significant number on 5%. So we will make those adjustments. I just want to make sure that you guys are, it's so easy to get muddled in all of these funds, but we'll make sure that the 5% allocated, the allocated administrative costs, which is 11% of the enterprise funds, reflects that 5% increase. And again, it won't be a significant number. We will make sure that everything is up to date and accurate. And the general fund draw, I think we're feeling very confident that without any adjustments by you, either on the revenue side or in increasing of expenses, we're fairly confident that the $755,000 draw is a good number, but we'll confirm all those numbers, and some of the other little tweaks and errors and adjustments that need to be made are being made, but they don't impact the bottom line of the general fund.
Okay. Councilman Baylor.
So I would address my feelings on the staffing of the police, and we're all kind of dancing around this issue. I support the fourth officer. I could see myself taking more money out of the permanent fund to pay him for this year. My problem is what do we do in 2021, 2022, 2023? Do we have the revenue to maintain that size of a police force? I have no doubt we're going to get some CARES money. The big push, the big holdup right now is one side wants more money for towns, municipalities, cities. I think there's going to be some money there. So I look for that. That's why if we hired a police officer for 2020, we'll be able to pay him through that funding. But then what do we don't hire an officer for 1 year. What do we do for 2021, 2022, 2023? That's where my hang up is, and I see declining revenues from the state. So that's what I battle with. I don't battle with the need. I think I spoke to a retired state trooper here, and I asked his opinion. You know, I think somebody like that has great insight. He agreed it should be 4 officers, and I said, well, problem is our budget. We're pulling this much money out of the permanent fund, and then you get that big pause and hesitation, like, dang, you know. So it's a hard call. Do we end up pulling $120,000 a year every year out of our permanent fund to cover that fourth officer? How do we make that money up? We've cut I think we've cut where we can cut in the departments. I think there's a little room here and there, but there's not $200,000 worth. So that's I would love to put it in the budget next week, but my question to those that support that, how do we fund that? How do we pay for that in the coming years ahead? That's where my thought process is. And again, I still think we should stay with the 5% rate increase. But the police officer, it seems like we're really hung up on that. That's my thought.
Okay. Council comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Gleason, then Allison.
I just remembered that we told the refuse department to try to get that loan, you know, or we're putting it on the ballot to get that loan for the equipment, right? And now we're kind of cutting their legs out from under them a little bit by taking that 5% away, and I think I spoke without thinking when I agreed to that, so I'm a little on the fence on that one now, because we might be hurting them more than we need, you know, more than we think, especially since at least that department's about to go and, you know, get a big debt. So, and I'm kind of in favor of hiring the police officer. I think Councilwoman Molina has a good idea on looking at those contracts with Whittier and Girdwood, and there is probably some ways we could raise revenue for the police department to afford that fourth officer. And I don't think we should make that call right now. I do think we should have our ducks in a row before we do it, but I do think that we can probably do it. So I would be in favor of moving in that direction. That's all I got.
Okay. Councilman Allison.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest for the budget, it sounds to me like, listening to everybody, that for the budget paperwork that we get, that 5% should be in there. And like Councilmember Sherman said, the cover letter can have the options there if we did it 6 months or didn't do it, what the fiscal notes are of that. But for the paperwork, I would leave the 5% in there. And it once again, it also affects the in-kind all throughout the budget, not just the enterprise funds themselves, but everybody else too. So.
Okay, so budget revision with a cover letter goes out in the packet. No work session Wednesday, but the budget approval's on the 16th agenda, just like we had it scheduled.
And I, as I said, I commit to getting this revised document out before the weekend, and we can, I mean, if there's anything glaring or questions or anything, of course, Ken and I will certainly be available on our cell phones and are at the ready to answer anyone's questions. And I guess
Thank you. I was just going to follow with that it's better if you can get into those this weekend and look at them. If there is something objectionable or that you're going to have an issue with, it's reach out to Helen and Ken so they can be prepared for that for the meeting to have an option for you. Any other comments, Council?
Mayor Copeland, this is
Councilman Sherman.
I'm just gonna jump on this that I really do not want to add extra police officer in at the next meeting. I really would like to have time to evaluate that and see the committee's report. I think that really plays on what Councilman Baylor just said in terms of long-term sustainability. You need to look at this. This isn't just, 1 year. We need to try and start to figure out how we can sustain our community in this new world that we are in without help from the state and look at things long term. And I think this is a great opportunity with a new manager to reevaluate some of our departments. And we've seen what some of them can do, and we have cut through the bone that there is equipment that needs to be bought. There survey says people want more police. So we need to look at all those things, but maybe, I'm just willing to take the time and go into the first quarter with an open mind and see what we can do that's possibly different, that could possibly lead to more long-term sustainability. Thanks.
Okay. Other council comments, questions?
Just
Councilman Baylor?
Yeah, just kind of closing towards that, I think. We've said it every meeting, but really appreciate the work staff's putting into this. I can see the stress on Helen's face. This is not easy, and it's not a perfect system, but we've got to work through it. And I really appreciate everybody's work, all the department heads and people that work for the community. And to add on to what Councilman Sherman said, that it's also important is if we do add that fourth officer, we need community buy-in to it too. So that's important. It sounds like you're going to work on that. So. But again, thank you, everybody.
Well, budgets are always fun with the brand new finance manager, but they're twice as fun if you manage a pandemic all year. Other comments, council, or questions? Okay, one more motion.
Move to adjourn. Second.
Have two motions to adjourn and 1 second. Is there any objection? We're adjourned. And Leif and Susie and Debbie, if I could ask for a quick favor, just 5 minutes. I just wanted to go over board and commission applicants, just what I do every year, if you got just a minute.
And you got an email from Debbie.
Thank you.